Hi, this is Katrina. Welcome to my studio and to my channel. I'd like you to join me in, I'm going to call this part one of a portrait of Leia. I painted this as part of World Watercolour Month. The prompt was resistance, and I thought that Princess Leia would make a really good topic, a really good subject for this prompt. Now, I am working on a Fabriano 1264 watercolour paper. It's 300 GSM, 25% cotton. Now, this is the first time I've tried painting on this paper, so this was a little bit of an experiment as well. The paints I'm using are my Roman Szmal Aquarius, and I'm predominantly using transparent gold ochre, mummy transparent red, Italian burnt sienna, and French ultramarine to make my greys, and Quin gold. So there's a few other colours, and I'm also using shadow violet. That's the predominant colours that I'll be using. I'll link a list of them in the description below along with the paper. As you can see, I'm using my silver black velvet brushes, and this is the method I'm using in this is very much a layering, a glazing layer by layer. And I'm also focused predominantly on trying to build up the values in the darker areas. So in this illustration, she's very much lit very brightly with a very warm light on one edge of the face, and then the rest is in darkness. So I'm trying to highlight that area. It was a very interesting painting process. I'm still fairly new to portraiture in watercolors, and it was interesting learning how to build up the layers on this paper. Now, one of the challenges I had with this paper is that in the wet in wet technique, particularly for that first layer, the pigments don't move around. Like once they've set, they really just sat. They didn't continue to move and bleed so much on the paper as I might have preferred, which gave an overall blotchiness to the finished piece, because this sort of kept happening every layer. There was a little bit more randomness and irregularity. Now, it does give the finished piece a somewhat loose and more abstract kind of look, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just probably not what I was after when I was painting this piece. But one of the advantages, this paper lifts amazingly well. So where I sort of realised, oh, I've lost the highlights in that braid, I was very easily able to go back and lift them out and create those highlights, even on what was actually fairly heavy pigment, like fairly dark pigment. So you'll see I start to go in and work on some more of the details, building up the shadows to sort of bring out some of the features a little bit more. It's very much a layer by layer, working out little areas that I can build up a bit more depth here, a bit more pigment here, and trying not to overwork any particular area at any one time. So it was a challenging process in some respects, and then getting used to how this paper was making my job just a little bit more challenging than I had hoped. But things that I am very happy with this piece about were, I think that I did get my values to a reasonable space. Like I was able to try and get that sense of shadow and light, I think worked quite well in this piece. Ending up deepening the background so that the face, that bright light on the face actually stands forward. Obviously, you know, fought a little bit with trying to get the features in the right position and the right proportions and things like that. That was, but you know, as we're learning different themes and skills, we always come across these challenges, and at what point we go, okay, that's where I am today. And we just make it work as best as we can. And one of the biggest One of the biggest challenges with this work was actually the drying, because I was working so many layers, and occasionally I'd do something and realise it wasn't working, lift it out, but then I'd have to let that section dry completely before I moved on. And I was trying where possible to let things dry naturally, but because I was working so many layers, I had to hit it with a hairdryer more often than I would probably preferred. It did work, but it was, it's one of those challenges with watercolour. It just becomes time consuming waiting for the next so that you can dry. I was trying to think about, okay, of that bit I can't touch until it's dry so I can work on this. Now, that was easier as the piece progressed. So, I could work around the nose, and then while it's drying I can do some hair, and then while that's drying I might be able to work on the eyes or the lips or something like that. So it was easier in some respects as I was working to sort of go, okay, I can just work on section by section and keep coming back. But, it was still very time consuming. You've got to be patient. I did use a hairdryer, like I took it and hair dried it to speed up the process somewhat. I don't always like doing that, but then on this paper I don't know that it made as much of a difference as it can on other paper, because as I say, once the pigments really didn't move a lot on this paper, and so hitting it with a hairdryer I don't think changed the outcome as much as it can on other paper. Now, as you can see with that eye, I was able to lift nearly all of it out, but obviously I need to let it dry before I can go back in and add more details again. And it's a case of, now, how much do I do before I actually, before it's too much and I have to let it dry again. So I'm getting better at working out where I can utilize, the paper's dry enough here to work here, so I can move here and, just leave this other bit for a bit longer so it can dry better. It was an interesting experience. I'm glad I did it, and I'm going to call this part 1 because I have redone this portrait. As you saw with my watercolour paper comparison, I had a look at how my pigments were behaving on different sorts of watercolour paper. So I have now redone this portrait using Arte paper, and that was a very, very different experience, and the final result is quite different. So if you follow me on Instagram, you'll have seen the final portrait as well. It really is quite different in the way that it looks. I do like the looseness of this piece in some ways. I think that there is a sort of a freshness in a way to how I've used my brush strokes, and it has that slightly looser characteristics. As you can see, just going in at the end with a little bit of white gouache just to pick up some of those little areas that you lose, particularly in the darks, and then creating a little bit of definition on the clothing, the edges, just to give it, a hint of a shape. So I hope that you like this. You came on this journey with me, just showing you the different colours I was using in that particular palette. Please like, subscribe, share, and I hope to see you in part 2 where we redo the portrait on Arte paper. Okay, bye.